The first thing Officer Dale ever learned in the academy was read the situation. Too bad he'd skipped the part about reading people. Rain slicked down the cracked sidewalks of North Marston Street, pooling in potholes and shimmering under the pale orange street lamps. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. But here, on this dim-lit corner outside a rundown grocery, time had slowed to the rhythm of a white cane tapping on the wet concrete. The woman moved carefully, every step deliberate. Her sunglasses reflected the faint flicker of a neon open sign, but the pale scars under the frames told their own story. She wore a navy coat patched at the elbows, her gloved hands steady except for the one gripping the purse, as though she knew the world might try to take something from her at any second. Dale watched from his patrol car, engine idling, his mouth curling into that smirk he saved for people who made him feel bigger just by being smaller. She looked slow, vulnerable, alone, perfect for the little flecks of authority he liked to indulge in when the night got too quiet. He stepped out, boots splashing, voice sharp. "Hey, you, stop right there." She froze, cane mid-tap, head slightly tilted in his direction. "Is there a problem, officer?" Her voice was calm, measured, the kind of calm that made Dale's teeth grind. "You're loitering. This is a high-crime area. I don't care what you were just doing. Show me some ID." Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Officer, I'm on my way home. I've lived here for ID." Now, he stepped closer, towering over her. The sour tang of power filled his lungs. She reached slowly into her purse, fingers brushing over something to phone. Maybe, but she hesitated. "You're making a mistake." "Oh yeah? And why is that?" Dale said, leaning in so close he could see the rain on her lashes. The corner store door creaked open behind them. A young man in a pressed navy uniform stepped out, shaking off his cap, his gaze locking instantly on the scene. His skin was the same warm shade as hers. His stance the easy, confident authority was not like hers. This was someone used to being listened to. "Mom." Dale blinked. The word landed like a sucker punch. "Mom." The blind woman's lips curved into the faintest, most dangerous smile Dale had ever seen. The young man stepped forward, the captain's insignia catching a glint of light. "Is there a reason you're detaining my mother, officer?" It wasn't a question. "Not really." Dale straightened, his throat suddenly dry. "Two didn't know, of course you didn't." The captain's voice cut like glass. "Because you weren't looking at her. You were looking at her skin, her cane, and the neighborhood. And you made a decision." The woman didn't move, didn't even turn her head toward the voice she clearly knew as well as her own heartbeat. But the air around her seemed to hum with quiet victory. Dale tried to find words, but the rain had a way of drowning excuses. The captain stepped between them, a protective barrier that also felt like a wall Dale couldn't climb. "You can go," he said, each word a weight. "And think very carefully about the difference between enforcing the law and abusing it." Dale opened his mouth, closed it, and walked back toward his cruiser, the heat of humiliation burning hotter than the summer sun could ever hope to. The woman tilted her head toward the sound of his retreating footsteps. "Funny thing about blindness," she said softly, almost to herself. "It lets you see who people really are." Somewhere deep inside, Dale knew she wasn't just talking about him. Rainwater slid down the back of Dale's neck as he sat in the cruiser, staring at the wheel but not turning the key. The wipers squeaked back and forth, smearing instead of clearing, a perfect metaphor for the way his thoughts refused to sharpen. Her voice echoed in his head low, deliberate, and damning. "Funny thing about blindness. It lets you see who people really are." He told himself he'd just been doing his job. Routine stop, nothing personal. That's the script most cops in this city learned to recite, half defense, half denial. But the way the captain had looked at him, like he was just another stain in the uniform. Dale had never felt smaller. He could have driven off, pretended it never happened. Instead, he pulled his radio off the dash and called it in. "Unit 12, 10-8, he said into the mic, "back in service, ready for calls." But even as the dispatcher's voice crackled back, Dale knew he wasn't ready for anything except maybe a drink. Inside the corner store, Captain Aaron Cole stood with his mother, gently guiding her to a seat near the register. The shop owner, Mr. Huang, handed her a paper towel to dab at the rain on her face. She smiled in thanks, folding it neatly before setting it on the counter. "I told you to stop coming here after dark," Aaron murmured, not in anger, but in that worried tone adult children reserve for stubborn parents. "And I told you," she said, "that blindness doesn't put my life on hold." He sighed. "It's not the blindness I'm worried about. It's people like him." "People like him," she repeated, testing the words as if tasting something sour. "Aaron, I've met men like that my whole life. They don't scare me anymore." "Maybe they should," he said, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "It would make my job easier." She turned her head toward the sound of his voice, her unseeing eyes steady. "Your job, son, is to make sure men like that don't get to decide who belongs where." Aaron didn't answer. He didn't have to. She'd been giving him that same lesson since he was 12, when he'd come home with a split lip and the story of a neighbor who'd told him to go back where you came from. Back then, she'd cleaned the blood off his face, kissed his forehead, and said, "We don't let ignorance decide our place in this world." 2 days later, Dale found himself called into the precinct captain's office, not Captain Cole's, thankfully, but Chief Ramirez's. The chief's office smelled faintly of old coffee and new paperwork. "Sit," Ramirez said, not looking up from a report. Dale sat, shifting in the chair. "You had a stop on North Marston Street last night." "Yes, sir." "With Captain Cole's mother." The words landed with a thud. Dale opened his mouth, but Ramirez held up a hand. "Don't explain. I've heard it all before. You thought she looked suspicious. Wrong neighborhood, wrong time of night." "I'm not interested in excuses, officer." Dale bristled. "With respect, sir, I was following procedure." "No," Ramirez cut in. "You were following a bias. And whether you realize it or not, that bias puts this department at risk. I'm ordering you to take part in the community outreach program. You'll be working directly with Captain Cole for the next 2 weeks." Dale stared at him. "With him? After yes. Maybe you'll learn something." Dismissed. The outreach program met in the basement of a local church, the kind of place where folding chairs formed imperfect circles and coffee was served in styrofoam cups. The first night, Dale showed up in full uniform, badge gleaming. Everyone else, community leaders, youth mentors, church volunteers, wore sweaters, hoodies, jeans. Aaron Cole walked in 5 minutes late, his mother on his arm. The room shifted when they entered, conversations dimming into curious glances. Aaron didn't look at Dale when he said, "Let's get started." They talked about policing, about community trust, about the thin line between protection and oppression. Dale kept his arms crossed, answering only when addressed. It was Cole's mother. Evelyn Ho finally broke through. She told a story about her father, a bus driver in the 1960s, who'd been pulled over on his route for driving suspiciously slow through a white neighborhood. About how the police had made him get off the bus and walk a line in front of his passengers while they laughed. "I was 12, she said quietly. "I didn't understand why they hated him. I just knew that it was allowed." The room was silent except for the hum of the vending machine in the corner. Dale felt something, shame, maybe, or the uncomfortable weight of perspective. He shifted in his seat. Over the next week, Dale showed up every night. He still didn't say much, but he listened. He heard stories from young black men who'd been stopped for walking home from work, from mothers who taught their sons how to keep their hands visible at all times, from elders who still flinched at the sound of sirens. One night, after the meeting, Dale found himself walking Evelyn to her car while Aaron spoke with a volunteer inside. "You know," she said, tapping her cane on the pavement, "I can tell when someone's watching me." Dale swallowed. "I wasn't. You were looking at me like a problem to be solved," she said. "But I'm not your problem, officer. I'm your reminder." "Reminder of what?" "That uniforms don't make you right. Choices do." By the end of the 2 weeks, something in Dale had shifted. He didn't think of himself as fixed, but he couldn't look at people the way he had before. On the last night, Aaron shook his hand, not warmly, but not coldly either. "We're not friends," he said, "but maybe you'll think twice next time." "I will," Dale said, and for the first time he meant it. The day it all blew up, the city felt like it was holding its breath. It started with a grainy phone video, posted to a neighborhood Facebook group by a teenager who'd been skateboarding past the grocery store the night Dale stopped Evelyn. In shaky frames, you could see the rain-slick street, hear the sharpness in Dale's voice, and worst of all, watch the moment Evelyn stood perfectly still, her cane visible, as he loomed over her. The clip went viral before lunch. By mid-afternoon, it had migrated to local news, complete with a side-by-side of Evelyn's calm face and Dale's scowling one. By dinner, national outlets were replaying it under the headline, "Blind Black Woman Confronted by Police Captain's Mother Speaks Out at the Precinct." The atmosphere curdled. Some officers grumbled about media witch hunts and out-of-context clips. Others privately admitted it didn't look good. By the next morning, protesters had gathered outside the station, holding signs that read, "See the truth, and justice is blind, but she's not silent." Chief Ramirez called an emergency meeting. The conference room was standing room only, command staff in pressed blues, union reps in rumpled suits. Aaron Cole, standing with his arms folded tight. "We need to get ahead of this," Ramirez said, voice low but urgent. "There's a press conference scheduled for this afternoon." A union rep, a broad man with a booming voice, jabbed a finger toward Aaron. "Your mother's the one stirring this up. She should tell people she's fine, that it was a misunderstanding." Aaron's eyes narrowed. "My mother doesn't owe anyone's silence to protect your image." Dale sat near the back, wishing he could melt into the wall. He'd been ordered to attend, but hadn't spoken. His name was already out there. Social media had made sure of that, and every camera in the city wanted a piece of him. Evelyn wasn't at the station. She was at a small cafe across town, sipping tea while a reporter from Channel 8 sat across from her with a recorder. "Mrs. Cole, why speak out now?" the reporter asked. Evelyn smiled faintly. "I didn't speak out. I was just living my life, and someone decided that was suspicious." "But you've agreed to attend the press conference?" "I have. Because this isn't just about me. It's about how many other people don't get a captain for a son to step in when they're stopped for no reason." Her words carried the kind of calm conviction that didn't need shouting to be heard. By 3 p.m., the plaza outside City Hall was a storm of voices, signs, and cameras. A makeshift podium stood at the top of the steps, flanked by microphones bearing the logos of every major network. Chief Ramirez went first, delivering a careful statement about ongoing review and departmental commitment to unbiased policing. It was the kind of speech designed to sound like action without committing to any. Then it was Evelyn's turn. Aaron guided her to the podium. The crowd hushed as she placed her hands lightly on the sides, the white cane leaning against her leg. "I've lived in this city for 52 years, she began. "I've walked these streets with sight and without. And I've learned that blindness doesn't just happen in the eyes, it happens in the heart." A ripple moved through the crowd. 2 weeks ago, I was stopped by an officer who didn't see me. Oh, he saw my skin. He saw my cane. He saw a woman in a neighborhood he didn't think she belonged in. But he didn't see me. She paused, letting the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. "I'm not here to ruin a man's life. I'm here to ask why, in 2025, a black woman still has to justify existing in her own city. I'm here to ask why my son had to wear a uniform for my dignity to matter in that moment." Aaron stood behind her, jaw tight, but there was a flicker of pride in his eyes. The crowd erupted cheers, chants, applause that seemed to shake the air. From the edge of the crowd, Dale watched. He hadn't been asked to speak. Part of him was grateful. Part of him knew this was his moment to disappear entirely or to do something that might matter. When the noise lulled, he stepped forward, not to the podium, but to the open space beside it. "I'm Officer Dale Mercer," he said, his voice carrying just enough to reach the nearest mics. "I was the one who stopped Mrs. Cole." The air tightened. Cameras swung toward him like predators catching scent. "I was wrong," he said simply. "I didn't stop her because she was doing anything wrong. I stopped her because I made an assumption. That's on me, and I need to own it." A murmur rolled through the crowd, some skeptical, some surprised. "I can't undo what happened," he went on. "But I can change how I see people from now on. And I will. That's not for the cameras. That's for me, for my badge, and for this city." He stepped back, heart pounding, unsure whether he'd just saved a sliver of his reputation or buried it for good. The press conference ended, but the conversations didn't. On talk radio, callers argued about whether Dale's admission was bravery or damage control. On social media, clips of Evelyn's speech were shared with captions like "Justice is blind but not silent." Inside the Cole household that night, Aaron sat at the kitchen table while his mother rinsed out the teapot. "You think he meant it?" Aaron asked. Evelyn dried her hands. "I think change doesn't happen in a moment, but moments can start it." Aaron nodded slowly. "Guess we'll see." Across town, Dale sat in his small apartment. the uniform draped over a chair. He kept replaying the press conference in his head, not the part where he spoke, but the part where Evelyn had said blindness happens in the heart. He'd thought of himself as a man who saw clearly. Now he wasn't so sure. 2 weeks after the press conference, the city's noise had shifted. The protests had quieted, but not disappeared. Community meetings were fuller now. Faces that used to stay home were showing up, speaking, asking questions. The department had quietly begun rolling out bias training sessions, the kind that officers used to roll their eyes at, but now had to take seriously. For Dale, every shift felt different. He'd always thought policing was about reading the streets, knowing where trouble would spark and where it wouldn't. Now he realized the harder part was reading himself. The test came on a Tuesday night. He and his partner, Officer Ruiz, were patrolling near the south side when a call came in. Possible burglary in progress. Suspect seen fleeing on foot. The suspect description, black male, early 20s, dark hoodie, was as vague as they came. They spotted someone matching the description half a block from the reported address. He was running but toward a small brick building, not away from it. "Let's go," Ruiz said, already unbuckling his seatbelt. Dale's instincts screamed pursue. But another thought cut in. What if he's running for a reason you don't know yet? "Hold up," Dale said. "Let's see where he goes." The man sprinted to the building's entrance, fumbled with the door, and disappeared inside. Dale followed at a jog, not with his gun drawn, but with his voice ready. Inside, the air smelled of burnt plastic. Smoke curled from the hallway. The man they'd been chasing was banging on an apartment door. Ma, open up." A cough rattled from inside. Without thinking, Dale shouldered past the man, kicked the door open, and was hit by a wave of heat. An older woman sat on the couch, dazed, her gray hair frizzed with static. Smoke swirled from the kitchen. "Come on," Dale said, pulling her to her feet. Together, he and the young man half-carried her into the cool night air, where Ruiz was already calling for medics. Later, sitting on the curb, the young man explained. He'd been coming home from work when he smelled smoke and realized it was his mom's apartment. He'd run the whole way. If Dale had treated him like a suspect instead of a son trying to save his mother, things could have gone very differently. For the first time in a long while, Dale felt not the power of the badge, but its responsibility. The story spread fast this time, without shaky cell phone footage, without a headline built for outrage. Local papers wrote about a police officer who'd helped save a woman from a fire, but what stuck with Dale was the conversation that followed. Evelyn called him. "I heard what happened," she said. "Just doing my job," Dale replied automatically. There was a pause. "That's what you said the night you stopped me," she said softly. "But this time, I believe you." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just said, "Thank you." 3 months later, the city council voted on a package of reforms: clearer stop-and-search protocols, mandatory body cam reviews for civilian complaints, and a standing community advisory board that would include civilians like Evelyn. The vote passed. Evelyn didn't see the celebration that followed, but she heard it louder, applause, the kind of noise that feels like a turning point. Aaron stood beside her, hand over hers. "You did this," he said. "We all did," she corrected. "Even the ones who didn't know they were helping." Dale was at the back of the room. No uniform tonight, just a plain shirt and the awareness that he was still learning. He caught Evelyn's unseeing gaze and, for a moment, felt seen himself. That night, walking home, Evelyn tapped her cane against the sidewalk and listened to the city breathe. She knew change was fragile, like glass it could crack under pressure. But for the first time in a long time, she also knew it was possible. And that was enough to keep walking. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.